the origin story?
My mom, she was the first American to win the world championships in Judo while a single mother working as an engineer in the 80s. Took some time off to like go on my journey of self-discovery.
Yeah, have an existential crisis.
Yeah. I ran into Dana there. Dana was wearing a shirt of me. I need to talk to you. I would go to all of the international training camps and find all the best girls. I'm gonna beat the shit out of this chick. I'm gonna make her hate me. This tattoo right here is how many seconds it took me to win all my fights. So
Shut up.
I beat everybody in under a minute. My neurological symptoms were just getting worse and worse. That's when I had to stop.
How did you get into this?
I figured out what actually makes me happy instead of what I thought would impress other people.
What the fuck is in our food?
Yeah.
You guys give that to a kid?
And that's why we got into this, is we just wanted to source our own food. It's healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy human.
We're gonna buy a farm, right? Like now that we've heard this conversation. I just would love to start at the beginning because I know of you, but I don't know how you became this woman that we all know. So not the beginning in terms of like, I was born on April 3rd, but more how did you get into, did you start out as a fighter? Did you start out doing MMA? Do you like, what's the origin story of Ronda Rousey?
Origin story is the prequel, which is my mom.
Okay.
Who is like actually the way better prequel that a lot of people don't know about. It's indie. And she basically got a perfect score on the SATs at 16, graduated college at 19. And then she was the first American to win the world championships in Judo while a single mother working as an engineer in the 80s and getting her PhD all at the same time. And so she tore her knee out when she was 17 and found a way to fight in Judo where she won predominantly with arm bars. You know, there was a lot of corrupt referees and stuff in that sport. And so she was
arm bars meaning
arm
like
bars like, you
choking
know,
someone out or
no, like putting someone's arm in a lock where you can like arch back and dislocate their elbow. That's a way that you can win in Judo. You can win by throwing someone flat on their back, choking them if they tap out or pass out. You pin them for, used to be 30, 25 seconds. They keep changing the rules. And you can get somebody to arm bar and get them to tap. But if you can let someone break your arm and you get out, you can keep fighting, basically. But if you call for the doctors to come and check you out, then you're just disqualified. So those are kind of the rules. So
wild.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the referees were not very. They're really corrupt, and so my mom was not a favorite back then.
Because she was a woman?
Because she's a woman, because she's Latina woman, because she didn't, kiss anyone's butt. She was not from a rich family. She, one of the referees, this is one of her favorite stories, that he said a derogatory comment to her, because you're not supposed to walk in front of the referees when they're sitting in the corner. You're supposed to walk behind them, but there wasn't a match happening, so she walked in front of him, and he said some shit. So she grabbed her by the tie and pulled him into the mat and tried to choke him out with his fucking tie. And so she was she was
a badass.
She's a badass. I really thought I was really laid back and not that intense, because I was always comparing myself to my mother, but it turns out I'm super intense. So then when I started doing Judo, she basically taught me how to do arm bars at a very young age, and then I kind of continued on what she taught me to make it my own. And referees were not very kind to me in Judo. A lot of it had to do with being her daughter, but also I discovered as a teenage girl that Americans are not that popular internationally.
Shocker.
Yeah, so I had to make every match into a fight in order to win. If the other person was playing the rules or trying to win by points, I would always lose. So I had to make it into a fight.
So wait, what does that mean? I had to make it into a fight.
So, Judo, there's point system, and it's changed a lot now, but if you throw someone on their butt, it's called a koga. It's a small throw. If you throw someone on their side, it's yuko. It's a little bit bigger throw. If you throw someone on their back, but it's not that hard, it's a wazari, which is, you get 2 wazaris, it equals an ippon, and an ippon is an instant win. You throw someone flat on their back, you win. And so there's ways to work the penalties and stuff like that. You're supposed to attack every 5 seconds, or it's not every 5 seconds. My mom lied to me as a kid. She said the rules is if you don't attack every 5 seconds, you get a penalty. I found out later it was a lot more the time than that, and she lied to me to make sure I attacked all the time. But so a lot of people can like play the rules and just do things where they act like they're attacking, but they're not, and they're keeping you from being able to attack. So they try to make you rack up penalties. There's like ways to play the rules like that.
Got it.
Which I was never able to do that. So I had to like basically brawl with the other girls to get, to be able to win. And so judo is basically, I mean, at the time I was doing it, the most competitive combat sport for women in the world. And, in a lot of the countries, they don't allow women to do sports. They would allow them to do judo. It was very like a high class sport, almost like combat equestrian, So the participation was like huge across the world. I mean, a lot of, I think most countries get their first Olympic medal from judo. It's like easy to invest in one person, and send them around to train than like an entire team or something like that. And so the competition was really high, and I knew that if I got into a fight with any of these girls, I'd be able to beat them in a fight. And my mom was like, you're always working to get to an arm bar, because that's the most definite way to win. If you pin someone, the referee can just not count it. If you choke someone, they can make you get up, they can take a deep breath, and you're fine. But if you break their arm and you still lose, you deserve to lose. And so she like drilled it into my head. And she's, I was recognized as being like a prodigy in judo very young. And she not only was, world champion in judo, but a PhD in educational psychology. And so she kind of knew how to like press my buttons and give me the right things at the right time to like make me into like, it's killer fighter as like a little kid.
Well, I wondered too, when you said that you had to turn it into a fight. To me, and I've never been in a fight in my life. Shocker. I'm sure you're shocked by that information. Now you're playing with them on a psychological level, not just a physical level. Because I would imagine it's harder to maintain composure or remove emotion if now you're like literally fighting, like you're fighting not for your life, but you're fighting in a different way than just trying to get points through penalties.
So we had these like international training camps where like all the best people in the world would come and like, train together, do a randori, our version of sparring. And you would see like, Olympic finals happening on the mat all over the place. And that was like so important to me. I would go to all of the international training camps and find all the best girls, and I'm like, I'm gonna beat the shit out of this chick. I'm gonna make her hate me.
Right.
So then by the time I fought them in a competition, they're like, oh my God, this girl like was all over my ass at all these training camps, and they already remember all the times that I'd been up against them. So it was a way for me to like get in their head, because everybody else was just trying to get through practice, trying to get through the match, and like, or the training camp, because it's usually like one like a week long or 2 weeks long. You have like two or 3 hour sessions in a day. So everyone's all beat up and trying to get through it. And I was like, this is the freaking Olympics. You're going down.
I'm going to destroy you.
19 years old.
Right.
I'm like this little girl, and I'm like, you're going down. And then the chick's like, please, this is just my job, So that was like one way that I would do it. Maybe I was, I was a little intense as a kid, I guess. But I already had that edge on them when I was competing against them. So a lot of times I competed against people the first time. It wasn't the first time. So I actually moved up a division to 70 kilos because I was having a lot of trouble with like making weight and stuff like that.
Which means you needed more weight or less weight?
It was basically I had to be a specific weight on a deadline ever since I was like really little, and it gave me like, I was dealing with eating disorders and stuff like that, and I just couldn't make the lower weights consistently,
Because how old were you the first time that you had to make a weight? Do you remember?
God, I mean, my first tournament, I was 11. I had to be weighed, to be placed in a division.
And you're trying, and again, I know nothing about this other than what I've seen in documentaries about fighting, but you're trying to be a certain weight so that you could compete against people who are smaller than you? Is that
everybody
goal?
That's basically the same size.
Okay.
But like if you can make a lower weight division, the average weight of the person is going to be,
yes.
lighter.
But did you do things as a girl to like, okay, for the day before we're only going to eat, chicken breast or whatever. Did you do things like that, or is that something that came later? I mean,
as a kid, I didn't have any idea how to make weight. It's something as a professional fighter, I got a nutritionist and all these things and stuff like that. But like, as like a kid, I remember I was trying to make 57 kilos, just like 125.5. And I was having trouble, and I just like didn't eat or drink for 3 days. And that was like my way to make that weight, because I didn't know how else to do it, you know? And so that just kind of created like a lot of dysfunction with my like relationship with food and everything like that. So I ended up competing in a division, I think, where I was actually a head shorter than everybody because I had so much problems with my weight. And but then I just kind of came out of left field and ended up like being really successful once I moved up. I think largely because of all these chicks that I was fighting, even though I was smaller, they're like, oh no, this is the girl from the training camps that is down in my division. And
so it was sort of like your reputation got there before you did, like sort of got in their heads before you did.
Yeah, so that's why when I came into MMA, I already had it in my mind. I was like, well, I could beat any woman in the world in a fight. I just had to figure out how to win a judo match through referees. And then I just heard about MMA. I'm like, wait a minute. So the referee does not get involved. He just stands over there. You're allowed to be on the ground as long as you want, because I was the best in the world on the ground. A lot of times the referees would make me stop the second I hit the ground. So my transitions had to be so fast. I had to be working into something while I was in midair before I even hit the ground because the referees were going to make me stop. And so, so I was like, wait a minute, you can work on the ground forever and they never stand you up and you can work on for an hour. I'm like, oh my God, everyone's going to die. I'm going to like do so great. I'm going to be the best at this. Are you kidding? And I felt like I was in on a secret that nobody knew about. So it seemed like I came out of nowhere. But for me, I'd been training and honing these skills for like years and years. And all I had to do was, you know, find the sport that would enable me to do it to its fullest. But women weren't exactly accepted in that sport at the time. So I had.
How old were you at that point?
23.
Okay.
23. Yeah. And because I got my Olympic bronze at 21 and then I quit judo and then took some time off to like, you know, go on my journey of self-discovery.
Yeah. Have an existential crisis.
Yeah. And then went into MMA and was so convinced it'd be a perfect fit for me and that I'd be awesome at it that I just had to, you know, convince everybody else that it was a good idea.
And were there other women doing it at the time, or you were trying to compete against men?
No, there were other women doing it at the time, but just not at the like UFC level. They were in Strikeforce, which where Gina Carano made her name. She is one of the reasons why any women were allowed to do it, because I think her dad was on like the Vegas athletic commissioner, really well connected, and so he specifically sanctioned fights just for her to be able to compete.
Oh wow!
So women weren't allowed to compete at all, and if it wasn't for her and her connections and like her charisma and everything like that, none of us would have got those opportunities. I don't think women would have been in Strikeforce or anything like that. But they were still not in the UFC, and Gina had, you know, quit and gone off to make movies and stuff. So women were just kind of like barely hanging on in her absence. And then the UFC had bought Strikeforce, which they were kind of like buying up all these other promotions and then absorbing their fighters and then closing it. And so I had a very short window of time from when the UFC bought Strikeforce to convince Dana to absorb the women's division and not just dissolve it. And so I was actually the first person that got signed under Strikeforce from when UFC bought it. And it was less than a year from when they bought it to when they dissolved it. And so I literally had, 3 matches. I had 1 match with them and then demanded a title shot and then won the title and then defended the title. 3 matches.
And that, because I was going to ask, how did you convince them? But did you convince them through fighting alone?
Yeah, well, Dana said that, because I finally got to talk to him. I was actually I was helping one of my friends out, Manny Gamburian, who was one of the guys I used to do judo with when I was a kid. And his coach used to judo with my mom when she was, training in LA back in the 80s. And so I was there to basically be there for his weigh-in. And then I ran into Dana there, and Dana was wearing a shirt of me with on the front page of ESPN Body, because I'd
sick.
And I was like, I need to talk to you.
I need to talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. You. And he basically was like, I can't look at any MMA media and not see your name. And I was like taking every interview, anyone, your mama's basement blog, I would talk to you. And I was just saying the most like controversial, outlandish stuff.
On purpose?
On
Like
purpose.
Yeah, you were trying
I
to
was
get,
creating like the character of myself, of which is like the very much exaggerated version of me. I'm actually very introverted and I don't like crowds. But you know, that was creating rowdy Ronda Rousey, you know? And it was just like headline grabbing and being able to like, you know, fine tune my answers, be able to say things succinctly, that things that fit in a tweet, that, you know, things that would be a headline. And he was like, I can't get away from seeing your name. And the way that I was winning, I wasn't just winning, I was like winning in seconds, you know, because of what I was taught in judo, maximum efficiency, minimum effort. And also I'd been, you know, I'd had maybe for a decade of my judo career, I'd been experiencing concussion symptoms more often than not for 10 years.
Yeah.
Because, you know, back then people weren't like, oh, are you okay? They'd be like, stop being a pussy. You have a headache? Get back on the mat. And so I would get a concussion and then not rest and hit my head over and over and over again and have these symptoms continue, or like, you know, my tongue would be like going numb, my lips would be going numb, my hands, and I'd be like having photo vision all the time, and that was just my life.
Yeah.
And so by the time I got into MMA, I'd already taken so much damage that I could like barely get tapped without seeing stars. So I had to create the most efficient fighting style that ever existed and be like, I have to be able to win quickly without them touching me. And so that was the way that I fought. Everyone, I mean, I have this tattoo right here is how many seconds it took me to win all my fights. So
Shut up.
all until I went to my first title match, I beat everybody in under a minute.
That's so sick.
And I love it when you look at the numbers, because you're like, you know what, that's really cool. I'm proud of me.
Bad bitch, man. That's awesome.
So it wasn't just the interviews, and it wasn't just the fighting. It was also, I was very self-conscious about my body and stuff like that. But especially like when I was growing up and going to school, I was like muscular, and people would make fun of me, you know, or, you know, teen girl in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And so when the opportunity to do ESPN Body came along, I went and did that shoot with Peggy Sirota, and I looked fucking banging. I gotta tell you. And then the trend of, you know, muscular bodies being considered like really sexy really took off from there. That's when you started seeing models go to boxing and try to get, you know, stomach definition and like, you know, arm definition in their arms and legs and stuff like that. And it kind of changed what was in style. And it was a really pivotal moment then. And so I was kind of trying to attack the beast in every way possible. I'm like, okay, I'm going to use sex appeal. I'm going to use like, you know, charisma and my mouth. I'm going to use my fighting style. I'm going to do all of it until Dana just could not ignore me.
So I have like 75,000 follow-up questions before we jump into that next part. How did you know to do that? Did you have someone helping you or advising you? Were you looking at like old school boxing? Like, and how did you know how important the attention on you would be in order to further your career?
It's actually kind of pro wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Pro wrestling is what kind of advised me, because I was looking at what's the difference between the women's fights and the men's. And it wasn't that the women weren't having exciting fights. It's just nobody cared. I'm like, why did nobody care? And it was because both the girls were getting on the mic and all trying to be Miss America.
Yeah, and there was no bad guy.
Yeah, no one wanted to be the bad guy. Yep. And there was no story there. And so I was like, oh, well, I just got to be the big bad bitch and make a story. Yes. You know, and I had to make the fight on the screen, determine the fight on the couch. I had to purposefully be as polarizing as possible. I had to make everyone disagree about me. You know, everybody wants to put people into a tight little box and then forget about them. And I'm like, I can't be boxed.
Yes.
And so I purposefully tried to make it so if you're having a bunch of friends over to watch a fight, a bunch of them are going to be like, go Ronda. And a bunch of them be like, no, you're a bitch. and then so when I win or whatever happens on the fight, it resolves what's happening on the couch. And so it becomes personal to everyone watching.
Wow. Yes.
And so that's kind of what I wanted to do. And And, you know, I was also would look at shows like Real Housewives and stuff like that. I'm like, look at all that drama. If they had a fight at the end of the season, everybody would watch it. And so I would was basically trying to manufacture a story around the fights.
I didn't understand that angle until I watched the documentary. I should know the kid's name, who was like a YouTube person, and they're two brothers, and then
the Paul brothers.
There you go. His thing on Netflix was the first time that someone explained having a bad guy in boxing, which I didn't know at all, and how that could make just as much money, if not more, than being the good guy, because everybody wants to see the bad guy get knocked out.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that in professional sports, it's not the Olympics. The Olympics is about the excellence of sport in the human form. Entertainment is entertainment. If you're a professional and you're getting paid, you are being paid to entertain. You need to be an entertainer. And in order to do that, you have to be able to tell a story. And everyone can't be a good guy in the story.
Yeah.
You know? And so everybody wants to be the good guy. Everyone's trying to pander and placate and be liked, because who doesn't want to not be liked?
So do you not care if people like you?
Now I don't. It was a journey. It was a journey to get there. And, you know, very, very liberating, because you just can't control that. People are just not going to understand you, you know, like there's no way through the mediums of like media or whatever ways that you, even if they've seen 1,000 interviews of me, they don't know me, you know, and you're never going to get that across. You're never going to be able to communicate who you are. And so like constantly trying to chase that is just like a miserable, impossible endeavor. And just to be able to let that go and be like, you know what? I am creating a character for people to be able to tell a story. Then you don't take things as personally. Mm-hmm. And I've been like much happier since then. But it's harder when you're trying to do that. You're like, okay, I'm just creating this character, and then everybody loves you, and you're like, wow, it does kind of feel good when everybody loves you, you know. But it gets boring for them after a while,
right?
And
it
you
flips.
Have to like have an arc as a character in their lives. You can't just stay there. And so yeah, it took a while to get there, but now, I mean, playing the heel, which is the bad guy, is my absolute favorite. When I was pro wrestling and like messing with the fans, oh, it was my favorite. I would love to like pick one out in the audience, because it always makes them feel special.
Yeah.
You know? When you pick out this one person and you do something crazy, you're like, you, that was me. That's because you suck. And you do something else. I'd like to see you do that. And you take off your shirt. You're like, you want my shirt? And they're like, yeah, you want my shirt. You suck it. You can't have my shirt. You know? And like, I don't know. I just thought that was my favorite part. But,
that's incredible.
And they love it too.
Yeah, of course. Of course. It's like I don't know, like the highest level marketing. And it's also actually kind of a safe way to approach the business that you're inside of, or any sort of media persona, is to understand that there is separation between you and the character that you play.
Yeah.
And the audience doesn't always get that.
And that's the thing, like with fighting, you are yourself. So when people, like, if pro wrestling, they're like, oh, well, they don't make it personal against the person playing that. They're like, oh, that's just their character. But with fighting, people really think that is you, you know? And so you have to be comfortable with people not knowing the difference between you, the character, and you yourself, and them having those opinions just about you, and just being like, all right with that. Which the way that I explained it to myself was, how narcissistic am I that I don't know who you are and don't care about a single opinion that you have until the day that you had a negative one about me.
Ooh, oh, wait, you know that's I mean? So good.
Like that, like what? That's just me being a narcissist. I need to sit the fuck down and drop it. And like, I don't care what you think about anything, about like politics or anything else or whatever, or like, or my dog, or, you know what I mean, my curtains. But suddenly you have an opinion about me and your opinion matters.
Yes, like, that is good. That is so good.
So I need to let it go.
Yeah, so take me back to the hallway. Dana's wearing the shirt of you. Mm-hmm. He says, I see you everywhere.
I'm naked on the shirt.
Nice. That's not awkward at all.
I'm just wearing pink hand wraps.
And you're like, you've done the genius thing, which is be so good they can't ignore you. Mm-hmm. Now he can't ignore you. What happens?
Well, I knew that some billionaire fighting promoter doesn't want me to come in and tell him about how great of a job, about how to do his job. And so I kind of leaned back on bartending, is when I was like working for tips. People come to the bar. They're not going to tip you because they like alcohol. You know, they're going to tip you because you like you. And I'm like, all right, I have this amount of time. I asked him for like 15 minutes of his time. We ended up talking for like 45. And I was like, this is the amount of time that I just need to make him think that I'm awesome, not to convince him that this is what you need to do with your business. And the way that I do that normally, which is actually a way that really helps myself, is I basically like ask people to teach me. If you ask someone to teach you something and are genuinely interested and want to learn from them, they immediately become invested in your success because you're a reflection on them. And so like I was just asking him of like my star was rising at that time of like how do you deal with like all of this stuff of being in like a public figure, and like how basically these things you were saying of people having negative opinions about you or this or that. And he told me a really interesting story that he was selected as, or he was nominated as one of Time's most influential people. And he said that Time magazine never got more like angry letters written about how is this guy even on the list? Fuck this guy, da 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 da, like just flooded with them. Not that he got that many votes, but he ended up being on the list because according to Time, the amount of time and energy it takes to click yes or no is so much less than it is to write a letter.
Yes.
And this is about influence,
yes.
not about being liked. And
yes.
you are influencing people. He was influencing people to have that much of a passionate opinion against him. They were taking all this time out of their day to write these long diatribes about how he shouldn't be on the list. And that's what determines influence.
Yeah, there's this great study or like report or something about people who listen to Howard Stern. Mm-hmm. And there's something that like the people who love Howard Stern, who like die for him, they've listened to him for decades, will listen to like 45 minutes of his show. The people who hate Howard Stern with a passion will listen to every single second that he puts on air.
Yeah.
So he actually has as much success from the people who hate him as the people who love him.
Yeah, I think it was Elvis's manager or something to make money off the people that hate Elvis started making I hate Elvis pins, so he can make money off
either way
if people weren't his fans. But I mean, so also I learned a lot, but at the same time, you know, every time he was teaching me something or telling me something, he was investing in my success. I became a reflection on him. And so then, you know, we all just shoot the shit and just got along really well. And we didn't even talk about fighting once, about me being in the UFC once. And he said that the second I left that meeting that he got on the phone with Lorenzo, and he was like, I guess we're fucking doing this. I guess we got to sign Ronda. And I didn't even mention it just because I was like, all right, I'm working for my tip.
Yes.
How am I going to make you fucking love me in
yes.
15 minutes?
Yes.
And, you know, I wasn't being fake. I adore Dana and everything that he's like completely like changed my life and allowed me to change the world by believing in me. But yeah, it was, I wasn't going to go in there and tell him how to run his $1 billion business. Some chick from Venice,
smart.
You know?
Did him giving you that story of like, he is someone who has had so much success while simultaneously being disliked by a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Did you walk out of that feeling better about, you know, having people dislike you, or was that more of a journey over time?
I mean, it did help, but it, yeah, of course was a journey that I had to go through. But, you know, applause is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, that's real. Well, and there's what Kobe's great quote, booze don't block shots.
Yeah.
It's like if you're great at the thing that you're doing.
But there was another, I think, it was an Eddie Murphy quote, and he was talking about when you give people the permission to make you feel good, you give them permission to make you feel bad. And so
that's good.
Yeah. I let them in and paid dearly for it, and will never do it again.
Like because of a specific time, or because it was just something that affected you as you became a fighter?
I mean, it gradually came worse over time, but then, you know, as soon as I wasn't perfect and the whole world, you know, turned around and shat on me, it was like a big wake-up call that ended up kind of making me like quit cold turkey. Of like
quit UFC?
No, like quit that addiction to other people's perceptions.
Right.
You know, I used to wake up and read my Instagram comments like the newspaper.
Oh gosh, no.
I used to look at my tag pictures repeatedly all the time to try and like.
I think a lot of us, when we first sort of got established as any kind of persona, at first you do it because it's like sort of fun. Like, oh, there's Peggy in Milwaukee, and that's a kind of an interesting take on it, and whatever. And then you start to come across the stuff. I as a writer, I will never forget the first negative review I read. I used to go every morning to Amazon, refresh the page and read any new review of my book, and they were all so sweet and kind. And then the first one said I was vapid and trite, and I was like like I went into such a spiral, days and days of like, I'm a terrible writer, why did I think I could write a book, I'm such an idiot. And at some point I was like, my God, a random stranger on the internet just made you question everything about yourself with 2 words that I still remember 10 years later. And it's so crazy. It was that moment I committed. I have never read another review since.
Good.
But I still read comments for a long time because I want to interact with my fans. And, you know, you'd be like, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, and someone would be like, you're disgusting and I hate you. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
So I used to do that for the longest time, flipped it, refused to take in any comments, but somehow they still sneak in. So like my aunt would call me and be like, I cannot believe that someone on the internet says that you're a whore. And I would, what?
Man, there's like people that like, they're obviously mentally unwell that spend their entire day just like, not just like coming after me, but like anyone associated with me.
Absolutely.
Like my mom, my sisters, anyone that's worked with me in my life, and just getting completely like bombarded with like all of this like just hate-filled stuff, and you're like, this is like all these people
crazy.
do all day. Like there's like, it's like an illness. And so my mom has a saying is, don't read the bottom half of the internet, just read the article and stop.
Above the folds.
Yeah, but it was something that I had to learn to you know, stop living to impress other people. And I realized that there was so much that I was doing that wasn't really for me. I was trying to collect all these bucket list level of, you know, experiences and all these achievements and all these cool things to like impress people that I don't like. And I thought that that kind of like hoarding all of these things would equal to me being like happy forever in the long run. You know, I thought that being the first American to win the Olympic gold would make me happy forever. I thought that becoming the UFC champion would make me happy forever. That retiring undefeated make me happy forever. And I had to kind of realize that like doing those things are awesome, but it's not going to like carry over into the rest of your life. You know, the day after that is a whole new day, and it was about like making the present like every single day like fulfilling and happy, like, you know, make every single day fulfilling to me personally, and self-validating, do things that are validating in themselves, that I'm not constantly looking for that, you know, that a girl's, you know, the good girl, you did so good. And like I'm like, what do I feel like, I'm like, was I being like a kid, like wanting people to like follow me around through my whole life and just like clap for me for everything I did? And so just kind of having to go cold turkey and getting away from all of that when I felt like the whole world hated me. I had to kind of like find what I found personally validating, and it wasn't like, you know, being on red carpets or being, you know, mobbed by people whenever I go out in public. And it was more like we have a regenerative ranch that we call, you know, Browse Acres. Check out browseacres.com if you want some regeneratively raised Wagyu and chicken. But like, you know, just being able to take some land that was completely degraded and mismanaged and like bring it back to life, you know, working with our animals and giving them a life worth living, and, you know, raising them humanely and everything like that. Like that was like so much more validating of like, feels like the whole world's crashing down around you. Okay, I'm gonna take this one little piece of land and I'm gonna make it better, you know? And like that's the stuff that like really makes me happy. And like being able to be home with like my husband and my kids, like, you know, being in front of thousands of people cheering for you is really awesome. But like traveling 3 days out of every week or all the time to be able to do it, it was just like not worth it, you know, to us, especially like waking my baby up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to get on the plane. It made me so sad. Yeah. But like just little things like cleaning out my duck pond when it's like covered in algae and like refilling it and seeing the ducks being like, yes, you know, that kind of thing. Like I figured out what actually makes me happy instead of what I thought would impress other people. And so it like made me like really reboot my life and do things that like I really enjoy, like, and stuff that's the point isn't to make money or to impress other people. It's just because I really enjoy it. Like I started screenwriting and I'm coming out with like my first comic book soon, and like
sick.
But it's just because I really enjoy the process of it, which it was a way that I'd kind of get into like destructive thought patterns. What makes me really great at fighting is what is kind of like one of my demons, is I will like focus on something for like hours on end. I will be like, this cup is it, all I can think about this cup, and you'll try to distract me. I'll be like, the cup, and I'll come back, and I just so like it makes it easy for me to like I'm gonna focus on how to do a straight right punch for hours on end and not realize I've been doing it for 5 hours and have a perfect one. But it'll also make me like fixate on something stupid that I tweeted 8 years ago and like not be able to get off of it. And so it kind of like taught me to like take those thought loops and put it into something creative. And so like instead of just picking at myself, I've actually like, here's a comic book, instead of like me ruminating over myself for time. So kind of like learning how to take those tendencies about myself that I can't control and putting it into something productive.
I resonate with that so much, the idea of sort of that obsessive thinking. And it reminds me of that saying that your greatest strength is your greatest weakness.
Yeah.
Like the thing that made you great at fighting is also the thing that can sort of lead to those looping thoughts coming back again and again. You keep referencing like world crashing down. Is that physically like something happened to you in fighting?
Meteor. No, okay. What? No, when I had my first losses, I in
the UFC.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's when, my concussion history had really just been adding up. And even when I was going into a fight and winning in 14 seconds and not getting hit, there's 50 rounds of sparring that went into that. And it got to the point where like my neurological symptoms were just getting worse and worse, and I just couldn't tell anyone about it, and I wasn't really being allowed to rest. They were fighting me all the time.
And just what were those symptoms that you were experiencing?
Like I could like barely get like tapped during sparring, and then I would get like photo vision, like blots in your eyes, like as if someone just took a picture of you. Really sensitivity to light, difficulty reading, like numbness. Sometimes I would get like numb tingling in like my fingertips or my mouth or my tongue, my teeth.
And did you know what was happening when you were experiencing those symptoms?
Well, I just know that every time you get a concussion, it's easier for you to get the next one. And if I basically had a concussion nonstop for 10 years before I even got into fighting, and I'm in a profession that I'm required to get hit in the head, it's not something that you can develop a callus or you break it and it heals back stronger. It's just an inevitable decline, which it sucks because I was at a point where I'd never been, faster, stronger, had a better grasp of like the art and the sport. I'd never been a better fighter, but I just didn't have the hardware to keep going. Like my brain just couldn't take any more punishment. And so that's when it got to the point where when I got to a point where I couldn't even take a tap without being knocked out on my feet, then that's when I had to stop. But, I'm proud of the fact that I didn't run away from my limits, and that I like pursued them with a vengeance, and like it had to get to that point for anyone to be able to beat me. And that's how like effective and like efficient that fighting style that I created is. I really believe that I created the most efficient fighting style that's ever happened. But that it got to that point, and I am a representative of the sport, and it's not going to do anyone any good if I'm like, in a wheelchair and, end up with one of the myriad of neurological diseases that come after like, fighters have fought too long, or like, football players, people that are in these sports have, chronic concussive injuries. And so.
Do those concussions show up? Like, do you have brain scans that show?
Yeah. I mean, I was so nervous that I have like CTE or something, and the doctors were like, we don't see it. Like they said, pristine. I have a pristine brain, which I was so like, anytime I lost my keys, I'd start crying. Anytime, you know what I mean? Anytime I couldn't think of a word, I'm like, what's the word? Like I couldn't think of the word artichoke the other day, and I was like, I'm dying. But as soon as I got like their clear bill of health. They're like, no, you're fine. You're not getting, Alzheimer's, dementia, or Parkinson's, or anything like that. But I mean, it's just at that point where I just can't fight at the top level anymore. Like, Stephanie McMahon gave me an open hand slap to the face, and like I saw stars.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know.
Crazy.
And I'm like, I should not be fighting at the top level anymore. If someone can slap me across the face and it leads to a concussive event. So it just,
So you were experiencing that in UFC before you went to wrestling, or this happened when you were wrestling?
no, I was experiencing it. Well, I took most of the damage when I was in Judo. And then when I came into MMA, it just became increasingly bad. I just deteriorated as my career continued, and I couldn't really tell anybody about it because then they wouldn't allow me to fight. So, and I just couldn't like admit weakness to anybody or even myself, because I had to like convince myself that I could pull off the impossible every single day of my life. And I just had to believe that I could do it, that I could be so good that no one could touch me. And then just got to a point where like, even if I'd never been faster, stronger, and more skilled, like my brain just couldn't take it anymore. And everybody cares about when you're fighting and you're in the match and all that stuff, but nobody really cares about you when you're 70, 80 years old and dealing with the repercussions of that. And so I didn't want to be one of those fighters that stuck around too long. You see these fighters, they look like eroded river stones. Like all of all of the points are taken out of their faces, and they can barely walk. And same thing with pro wrestling too. Some of these people just like, they stick around too long because they can't let it go, because it's their entire identity. And I had to like find my identity outside of what I did and what I was great at and what people knew me for. And part of it was, finding pro wrestling, which I loved, that if I got dazed or something, someone wasn't going to like jump on top of me and punch me in the face a bunch of times. You could be like, give me a second. Yeah. I'd be like, okay, I'll put you in a hold. I'm going to get her, like, are you okay? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, So I was able to function. And because, I didn't have CTE or anything like that, I was like, okay, like, I can't take these hits, but I'm working with somebody that is helping me. So if I, end up getting a concussion or something in a match, I can work through it. So
when did you start wrestling? What year?
2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
And forgive me for not knowing, is that something that still happens, or that was a period of time?
I did like a run for a year, and went. Basically, my debut was with Kurt Angle against Stephanie McMahon and Triple H, and it's considered one of the greatest tag matches of all time. It's
oh,
classic.
really? Oh, so cool.
I love it. And then by the end of that year, I was part of the first ever women's main event in WrestleMania. And so
Sick.
It was a good year.
Yeah.
But then I went off to go have a baby, and then came back after my baby and had like another run, and then just finished in August.
Oh, just finished.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it the kind of thing, like I'm seeing it right now with The Rock, like he's not in wrestling and then all of a sudden he'll show up and everyone craps their pants and so excited that The Rock's here. Is wrestling something where you could just literally for the rest of your life be like, what up guys, I'm here at this match?
I could, but I didn't have the greatest experience working for Vince McMahon and all of that. And it was just like, it was such like a shit show all the time, because they would be changing the show all of the time until you got out there. And so a lot of times you're doing these matches where you're not only are you not allowed, like you don't have opportunities to rehearse it, but they've changed it multiple times, cut your times multiple times. All the things that you're going to say, they've changed it multiple times throughout the day. And so,
do you have an actual script?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not like you just go out there and sort of like wing it.
No.
Oh,
but
I didn't know
it's
that.
like it's a constantly changing script, constantly changing choreography, that it's just like I just got frustrated to a point where I'm like, people just aren't being allowed to do their best work. And like that first match that I had, that was amazing. We had like weeks to put it together, and all the best minds in the industry had a part of it, and it was absolutely incredible. And then the main event of WrestleMania match that we had was literally thrown together the night before, and then we're still putting it together the day that we did it. We never actually got to do the match itself before we went out there.
Oh, wow.
And we were told that we weren't allowed to do power slams because the guys before us were doing power slams, which we went out and did it anyway. But yeah, there was a lot of misogynistic bullshit going on there, which, you know, UFC, they were like open to changing and just wanted to do what would make the most money. And, you know, the WWE under Vince McMahon was just like what his worldview, what he thinks the world should see. It was basically him pushing his viewpoint onto his viewership, you know, the bottom line, and the wrestlers be damned.
Was he there when you did it the first time but not the second? Or
He was there the first time. It just got worse the second time around. Like,
why do you think that is?
I mean, I think a lot of it had just to do with like being the king of his fiefdom and having a bunch of these like little cronies in his ear. And
'cause he's done it for God, how long? I mean,
Yeah.
I remember Vince McMahon when I was a little girl watching wrestling with my grandpa.
Yeah.
Like, he's been in it for a long time.
well, supposedly he's out now because of all of the sexual assault stuff that's come out. But
About him.
yeah.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, but he's still running it through all his little cronies that are there. They need to completely clean house of like, you know, of his basically like this guy Bruce Pritchard, who's like the head of creative or whatever. I've never heard him say a single one of his own opinions. Just Vince says this, Vince says that, Vince says that. So when Vince left before, when it came out that he was like using company funds to like pay off a bunch of like, I think they found like $12 million in hush money that he'd paid to all these different women for like sexually assaulting them.
Whoa.
And of the company's money. And that's just what they know about. And yeah, then so he was supposedly gone, but he was still running the show, just calling it in while he was gone before. And so supposedly he's gone now, but I wouldn't really want to be going back to work for them anytime soon, because the last time he was gone, he was still running the show.
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
hopefully he's completely gone and
Crazy.
they're, you know, running it in a much more responsible way and actually allowing people to rehearse so they don't get needlessly hurt. But honestly, I don't even like performing in big stadiums and stuff like that. I like non-televised house shows are kind of my favorite. And if I was to continue wrestling, I'd probably just like do like some indie stuff that's like in town and like a gymnasium over here, you know? Like that's the stuff that I really enjoy.
People walk into like the high school gym, like, is that Ronda Rousey?
Yeah, and I love it when it's small enough that you can actually interact with people in the crowd. Like those are things I really enjoy. And I don't feel like I have to be on TV and in a big stadium to have a good time. If anything, it like puts a lot of undue pressure on it. I just want to go out and have fun. And that's kind of what got lost, I think, while I got into pro wrestling, because it like kind of snowballed into, you know, being about like the women's division and trying to elevate everybody and all this stuff. And I had to like kind of like check myself when I got to the point where I realized, okay, this company isn't really going to work with me to be able to create something great. And I'm just an action figure on their board. I just want to be here and have fun with my friends.
Yeah.
You know? And that's what it's really about. And that's why I got into it in the first place. And so I think like the women that are there now are freaking amazing and they got this. And I really believe that they're going to be able to, you know, continue it without me. But, you know, I think I get the most fulfillment out of doing like small non-televised shows where I can just put my hair up in a ponytail and not put any makeup on and not worry about what I'm doing being dissected by a million people and performing in front of fans that are like really excited to see me in a gymnasium.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
Like small show. I'm like, I want to be like Adele and just have small shows and be like cool like that. Basically.
Do a Vegas residency. Come on, that's the answer. So does the next chapter for you feel like it feels like the farm? It feels like, or you just sort of resting right now and kind of figuring out what's next?
The, you know, Rousey Acres, the farm, and then our, like, you know, we're regeneratively raising our animals in order to like make our whole farm into like a carbon capture, and it's like one of the most scalable climate change solutions. I think like I was watching this thing called Project Drawdown that was going through all the solutions for climate change and how we can sequester all this carbon. And regenerative farming is one of the most scalable solutions. If we like just convert a small percentage of, you know, the land we use for livestock into being regenerative. We can.
And what does regenerative mean?
It's basically using rotational grazing. And so it's like mimicking natural processes where you focus your animals onto a small area every day and then move them. And so you don't just keep them on open pasture all the time. So like great herds of bison would come through and like eat all the grass down to almost nothing and then get pushed off by a bunch of wolves and not come back for months, you know, and that would allow the grass to go through its entire growth cycle. So the way that grass works is that the blades are mirrored by how long the root hairs are. And so if it's kept short all the time and the roots are short all the time, the soil, basically a lot is lost to erosion and stuff like that. Nothing is added to it. If the grass is allowed to go through its full growth cycle and the roots mirror it on the bottom, when the cows or grazers come down and bite it down, then it sheds all those root hairs. So all of that carbon from the atmosphere that was in the form of those roots is now part of the soil. And all of the grass that had been bitten off into blades is now like pooped on top of land and now layered on top of the soil. And so then we follow that up with our birds that come through in schooners that are moved every day. And they scratch through all the cow patties and spread them out. And then
Chickens? Okay.
Yeah. And then they mix in 300 pounds of their own poop into it. And then we just move them to a different spot every day. And then the grass comes back, you know, a lot better than last time. And then the soil has already been added to in these layers. And so when it grows back through the whole layer, then you let them bite it all the way down. And then it sheds all the roots again and it's pooped on top. And then so you're building soil. And all of that soil is basically carbon from the atmosphere that is being sequestered into the ground using the animals and these natural processes in which, you know, the way that you get meat from the store, people keep the animals in one area and the food in another area. They're growing a bunch of GMO corn over here and they have the cows in a feedlot over there. They have the chickens and, you know, in like these big, even free range chickens are like in these big structures where they can barely walk around and they have a bunch of, you know, drippers to drink from and like, you know, food that was grown somewhere else. And so
you said free range chicken?
Yeah. Yeah. Free range chicken is basically there's not in a cage and there's kept in like a warehouse.
So should we be aiming at pasture raised?
Pasture raised.
Okay.
Is what you're looking
that's
for.
Good. Okay.
And so that's what we have is pasture raised, and we give ours we have our corn and soy free, so they have like a canola based blend. And with our cows we do supplement them with grain, but it's mostly barley with like some canola, and we have like a little bit of corn. But we're partnered with a molecular biologist who like custom makes every single animal's like diet, and so it's for what's best for the animal and sourced, you know, responsibly and as locally as we can. So yeah, it just ends up being like really, really healthy, really happy animals in the land. Is just like better with every season. You see like the effect that they have on it, and they're working in concert with the land. And it's not like we need to leave the grass alone and take the animals out of it. It's like, no, like the animals are a dynamic part of this ecosystem. And once we've been using the cows to like rehabilitate these grasslands, we've had like herds of wild antelope coming through and like all these like mule deer that are making it like their home. And like our ponds are like, you know, hosting like migrating geese and like blue herons and all these things.
How many acres do you have?
We have 660 ourselves. And then our partner has, couple thousand, and they're neighbors.
Connected. Oh,
yeah,
okay,
so
cool.
we can move them all back and forth. But since we became involved with them, we converted everything into being regenerative, so that we move them into a different spot every day.
Do you do that
personally?
Yeah.
I'm actually hopefully going to be able to start helping, because I was training to be able to run our stock dogs and stuff. But we actually have a really easy system where we just have like an electric wire.
Oh, okay.
And we just kind of like move it.
Oh, I was imagining you on like a horse.
No, my husband's doing all of that.
Cool.
He's like the horse riding, you know, guy. But no, it's like very stress free. You can see, you just basically a lot of times you just open the gate and they just walk across the street. You know? It's not like all crazy wrangling. They kind of like know the drill, and you open their gate and they're like, oh, cool, new grass, and they just walk over there. It's pretty simple once you do it. But to be able to.
How did you get into this? You watched The Biggest Little Farm?
No, actually, I watched The Biggest Little Farm while we'd already got into it.
Nice.
And we were like, we can do it. But no, I think it was largely like while I was completely hiding from the world and hating everyone, that I wanted to like live in the middle of nowhere and never interact with anyone ever again and be completely self-sufficient. And so that's how we, my husband was into bow hunting before, and that's how we would source our meat. But we're like in California, we can't really just walk out the door and go hunting. And we get busy with the kids and stuff. So he was like, well, why don't we just like try and raise our own cow? And so then we got Kobe from our partner, who was our first Wagyu, and we raised him for like a year, and then we like harvested him at home. Like he was just like eating his breakfast, and Trav went up and shot him, and we were devastated because we would like walk him around on a harness. He like being pet like a dog, and I remember like we were looking into because you'd always look in the backyard and like look for him, like what's Kobe doing, And first time Trav looked for him and he wasn't there, he was like, I just feel like I betrayed him. And it was so sad. We were like, we're never doing this again. And then we were given the hanger steak to have that night because the rest of them took to age, and took the first bite of it, and I was like, this is the greatest meat I've ever had in my life. Kobe! Oh my God, Kobe! And then Trav got on the phone. He was like, all right, we got to get another steer. And then we had Porter come, who was my favorite cow ever, which we raised for like 2 years. Oh, Porter. But
can I just say, though, that this is something I've heard this so often. I grew up, so many people in my family hunted, and it just was very much a part of like how certain family members were able to provide meat for their family for the winter was to hunt. They'd go hunt deer and then like dress it and do the whole thing. That I've heard this again and again, that if you have never actually gone through the process of like growing a vegetable, processing an animal, you have no idea what goes into it.
None.
And I heard someone say something once, like if you're not willing to actually do that with your meat, that you shouldn't be having meat. Like if you're not willing to understand what goes into the process, if you're just sort of going to the grocery store and getting that package thing and it's on your table and you don't think about the fact that you raised the animal and then Travis had to go put an end to Kobe, like that you have the, I don't know, it's just it feels like there's more integrity in that choice.
Well, I think a lot of people try to gatekeep caring about the animals that like support our lifestyle. They're like, well, if you're going to kill an animal and eat it, you don't care about it. You can't care about like, well, I should care more about this animal because it's like, well, what we're making it sacrifice to feed like our family. I don't want to turn a blind eye and let it live miserable knee deep in its own shit. Like I owe it to that animal that is dying to feed my family to make sure that it has a life worth living, and to make sure that I'm not feeding my family poison. Like an animal that's stressed out and like basically in inhumane conditions its whole life. Like you're eating that. All of that stress, all of those hormones, all of everything that it's going through, like that's becoming part of your body. And a lot of people think like, oh, well, this meat that I'm getting at the store is cheaper and easier. Like, yeah, but you're going to pay for that in the long run. You're going to end up paying for that in like medical bills. Like so many of these like disorders and stuff that are like spiking now have so much to do with like our food, changing and how people are sourcing it. And industrial farming is just like, it's like not just killing the planet and destroying the climate. It's like it's killing us.
Well, and we also have we allow so many things into our food in the U.S. that other countries would never touch. Mm-hmm. Like there was this thing this summer I kept seeing people who were going to Europe and they would come back and they were like, I just spent 2 weeks eating pasta, bread, cheese, whatever, and I'm not bloated. My body doesn't hurt. I don't have inflammation. What the fuck is in our food?
Yeah.
And my boyfriend is European, and he's like terrified of so many things here because he's like, we would never. What is this? What, like snacks and different things that you would feed your kids. He's like, you guys give that to a kid? Like, what is in that?
That's why we got into this, is we just wanted to source our own food. We just wanted to raise a backyard cow and just know what kind of life that he had and make sure it was a good one. And like, it ended up being like so incredible that we wanted to get into the business. But like Porter Porter, who, you know, was my favorite cow ever, and Bavette before him. Bavette was, I mean, we know all the cows by name. Like, Bavette is who I was eating when I was like growing my baby in my belly. You know, Porter was who I was eating when she was only living on like breast milk. Like, my baby is made out of these animals that like we love and care for and knew by name. And a lot of people are like, well, how can you even like name these animals and like have a kind of relationship with them if you know you're going to eat them? I'm like, well, these animals deserve to like be loved, you know, and I'm not going to like separate myself from them emotionally to make myself feel better. Like, I'll take on that pain, you know, to make sure that they live a great life, you know. I don't want to be numb to it. I don't want to not care, you know. And there's no meat that goes like to waste in our house, because our kids, you know, they know every animal by name. Like, who are we eating tonight, you know? Oh, this is Zing, this is Vanth, this is Orcus, this is, you know, and we have like, we even like preserve like the European mounts. We have the skulls that we try to keep so we have Kobe is like literally overlooking our dinner table. And like my baby like learned to crawl on Porter's hide, you know, and it's stuff that we want these reminders around us. It's not that like, I am this great person that has killed this animal. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to forget.
Yeah, there's a cost to this.
Yeah. And I want to use everything that we can, you know, like I don't want to waste anything on this animal. And so like one of the cool things that we got into once we started sourcing our own meat is my husband became like this meat connoisseur, and we had to learn how to cook every single part of the animal. And so now we learned how to do like ossobuco, and like we discovered all these different kinds of cuts of steaks that we absolutely love, you know, that are not just the ribeyes or the New Yorks or stuff like that. Like, I love like chuck roasts and stuff like that, or like a chuck steak, and like and all these different things that I never would have found if I didn't care enough about this animal to learn of like, okay, how are we going to cook a tongue?
Right.
How am I going to make a tongue taco?
Right.
You know, or something like that. But it's because I don't want to throw this out. And it ended up being like the most healthy, most incredible meat. I mean, like Wagyu in general is just an incredible breed. They have, they're known for the intermuscular fat because they were like working animals in Japan. They would like pull carts and stuff, and they needed like this intermuscular fat to pull like, these heavy weights to put this energy straight into their muscles. But it's actually the highest source of monounsaturated fatty acids in red meat, which is one reason why the meat's so good, because when you eat it, it melts in your mouth. It's not solid at room temperature. So like the first time my boys ate it, they're like, is there butter in this? They called it butter beef. They're like, no, there's no butter. But the reason why it's so healthy for you, it's not solid at room temperatures. It's not what's sticking to your arteries. You know, it's these good fats that your body processes really well. I mean, my daughter pounds a steak, and our chicken too, which is also like really healthy, raised and incredible. And like, I'm a little concerned that my daughter's like 2 years old and kind of ripped. And I actually ended up breaking my mom's wrist when I was 13 on accident. One day she stopped doing randori, stopped sparring with me. I didn't know why. And then a couple years later, I'm like, Mom, why don't you randori with me anymore? She's like, oh, well, you broke my wrist when you were 13. I was like, what? She's such a badass. She completely no-sold it. I'm like, man, my daughter is going to whoop my ass, because she is a specimen, and she's eating like great food at a very, very young age. You know, I grew up on like, you know, cereal and canned soup. Yeah, and I still ended up being like a crazy athlete. This girl's like raised on like pasture raised poultry and Wagyu. She's gonna like shoot lasers or something. I don't know.
Do you guys do produce on your land as well, or is it just the animals that you raise?
Yeah, I mean, not up in Oregon, but for us personally, so we get all of the poop and the hay and everything we put into these compost like heaps. So we always have and we started like putting a pasture in the back that for all of our reclaimed water from like the roof and the driveway and stuff like that. And so my husband built all these planter boxes that we filled up with all these really nutrient dense dirt that we composted from their poop and the hay. And so I basically have like a store in front, and I'm like, well, they're like, what do you want for veggies tonight? I'm like, well, the broccoli is looking really good outside, and I just go out and I snap a bunch of broccoli off or whatever, and it's all seasonal, and it's all the dirt is basically our cows are producing it, and it's like so good, and it's like so much better than what you get from the store, and it actually tastes like can taste stuff.
Yeah.
Like you go to a store, you buy you're talking about in Europe. You ever had tomato in Europe?
Yeah, oh my God. I was just going to say tomato is the worst when you have almost like 95% of what you can get at the store right now. My grandma grew tomatoes and they were the best. Yeah. And so it's like, I know what a real tomato tastes like. And you go to the store, it's like nothingness.
Well, it's like the saying is healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy human, healthy climate. And these industrial practices are basically, they're taking dead dirt and having to put all these inputs in it of like, chemical fertilizers and all these different things to grow these plants that aren't healthy, that they have to douse with pesticides so that things won't eat them. And then you're getting something that looks like a tomato, but it lacks all the nutrition because the nutrition comes from the soil. And so like what we're trying to do with like Rousey Acres and everything is we're rehabbing the soil. Everything you're watching with Biggest Little Farm, it all comes from the soil. And all the food that we're growing out front, it's really great because the soil is coming from our cows. We're actually like growing like this organism that's in the ground that people just forget that it's part of the process. I think they can just pump it full of chemicals and make something that looks like a tomato and it's the real thing, but like the nutrients actually come from the ground. So my husband's actually doing like a bunch of like soil seminars this coming up week, and
cool.
Yeah, we're big nerds about it.
I know. Oh my gosh, Jack and I are nerds about so many things. We're both ready to buy. We're gonna buy a farm, right? Like now that we've heard this conversation, we go down rabbit holes on the most. Like we both smoke meat. And so we've literally had like hour-long conversations about how to do a brisket. So
I gotta
oh my God, we would die.
For our briskets.
For Christmas, actually, Jack got me a brisket that's like the size of me. It's in my freezer because I'm gonna need a minute to figure out how to smoke this thing. But I totally get it, and I get the love of like when you've had this sort of all these things and all these people and big and it's loud, and to go back and do something with your hands, literally to work on something with your hands, especially when it's outside in nature and getting your hands dirty. And I totally freaking get it.
Yeah.
Are you actually like working the farm day to day, or is it something that you're sort of part of, but it's not like your day to day life?
I mean, like at home we have like a couple of acres, like 2-3 acres that like I like do like the gardening and stuff, and like I help to like move the animals every day. So we only have like 5 cows in the back right now, so we feed them all separately so we can make sure that we know what everyone is eating and how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And so like I'll do a lot of like, oh well, Chucky's our calf right now. Like Chucky at this point needs to be moved with his mom and then allowed into the back, and we bought the back property so they have like an extra area and stuff back there. And my newest thing is like building rock dams through the back to like slow down the water and help it like permeate the water table and stuff. So I just kind of do stuff more with like our property in that's here in like east of LA. But when we go up to like Oregon, like I helped at the last branding and stuff like that, which was like kind of intense.
I bet.
But it's this whole other skill. So I'm trying to learn. My husband is really getting really big into like roping and learning all of this stuff and like being hands-on cowboy. But
did you guys do like a big party after the branding?
Actually, because you take all the balls out of all so we make tacos out of all the balls because you can't waste anything.
Of course.
So yeah, we have to make testicular tacos to celebrate. But we also had a friend of ours, Claude, who just opened this food truck called Meat and Buns that's using our burger, and he made these like hot dog burgers basically, where we like made the burger into like the shape of a hot dog.
Oh,
and he put this incredible relish on it, and then we all had that in testicular tacos. But that was like that was our branding party.
I just remember because I grew up in Bakersfield, which is a really big ag community, like 2 hours north of here. And when we had a family we were very close to that had a cattle ranch, and whenever they would do a branding, it was like a big deal. So they'd brand all the cows, and then there'd be like a big party for everybody and it was like cowboys drinking whiskey, and there was like music, and I just assumed this was all ranchers, so that's why I asked.
Yeah. I like help with like vaccinations and stuff like that, and I'll be like one of the people that like takes down all the numbers and like makes all the vaccines, and sometimes I'll put them in and stuff. So I try to help as much as I can, but I also, like, there's a lot that I don't know how to do. So
Yeah.
I help with, like, investment investment and enthusiasm.
There you go.
Yeah.
Is there like a hope to have a bigger ranch here someday, or to move to a bigger ranch? Like, is that part of the future, or you guys are just chilling for now?
My hope is to be able to have different ranches all over the place, like different areas just offer so many different things. They're like almost like think about like a vineyard, and so the kind of like meat that you would produce in like South Central Oregon, which is where Rousey Acres is now, like the animals that we have down here in California are just like so different. And it's not like they're better, but I mean, like Porter, my favorite cow ever, he used to like lay out in the sun. Like we had all kinds of shade and like water and everything. It would be 110 degrees and he'd be laying out in the sun because he was like so fat that it would like insulate him from the heat. You touch his fur and he would like burn you. But I mean, he was like the most incredible cow that I've ever known and ever eaten, because like I'd gotten these like A5, Wagyus from Japan, but they like basically raise them in crates. They can only has big enough room to stand up and turn around. And I don't know, they're just like, we all kind of got sick when we ate a bunch of it, and like with Army, we eat so much, but it's just their life so much impacts like what the end product is. And so like in Oregon, they have to go through a winter and they have like all these volcanic soils, and it's very different than like the cows that we have in Southern California. And we eventually want to move, to Hawaii when my boys graduate from high school. My husband's Hawaiian.
Favorite.
But we would like to have like raise some like cows out on Big Island and be able to have like
super volcanic.
Yeah, and just be able to have like an operation out there and to be able to like feed people locally, because so much is like brought in on all these barges. That's like one of me and my husband's dreams. We want to have a ranch out there and like be like a local source of regeneratively raised like really high quality meat.
Do you know Maui Nui?
Yes, actually, they're friends of ours.
No way.
Yeah.
I would love to interview him.
Really?
Yes. Like all our meat comes from Maui Nui, where like all my
their
snacks.
bone broth?
Oh, I haven't had their bone
so
broth.
good. You have to get their bone broth.
Oh, okay,
They're
I will.
amazing.
We do the thing where they ship you a box of frozen meat every month. And
Yeah,
then
the
you just
subscription. We're subscribers
that's
too.
all my freezer is. But it's such a cool company. I just feel like they've done something really rad. I feel like I've like gone off.
No.
them
So
on the show.
everybody that doesn't know what Maui Nui does, they harvest invasive axis deer from Maui, and it's
with bows, right?
Actually,
or
no,
sniper rifles.
Night scope sniper rifles.
Right, I was right. Wrong thing.
With like USDA inspector there with them, and they do it all like out. But it's like the axis deer are such a huge problem because of the erosion and all of them like stressing out the landscape. They need this population control,
and they do the sniper rifle at night so that they cause the least amount of stress to the venison.
Exactly.
So the meat doesn't have any of that stress. And like I've heard him tell the story before of like they'll take out a deer and the other deer in the group don't even know that that one just dropped. Like they just keep chilling.
Yeah.
So it's really good though. And they do like a monthly subscription box and you can get it delivered.
Yeah, they're like the opposite side of the spectrum of ours, because ours is like, theirs is like really, really lean. It's like very, really low fat,
Very
amazing
lean.
meat. Ours is like much higher in fat, but it's really healthy fat. The best burger, one of the best burgers I ever had, was we mixed our Wagyu burger with the Maui Nui burger, because so much of our fat burns off when you're making a burger, and so the Maui Nui absorbs all of it. And so if you make a axis deer, because axis deer does not taste gamey really, like any other kind of deer, it's incredible. But yeah, we called it the Kainalu burger, and we mixed the Wagyu with the axis deer, and it is the best thing I've ever had.
Okay.
Like better than either of them on their own. Like there's something about them together.
Okay.
That you gotta
That's
try
really
it.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And it's really good for you.
Yeah. No, it's such a good company. So everyone should go spend money with them. Do you guys do like, can we buy meat from you? Or it's like
browseyacres.com.
Oh, so you really, okay.
We have subscriptions as well, and we have Wagyu and our pasture raised poultry, and you can like make your own box and stuff like that. And
cool.
We're like gonna make the website even better. But yeah, you can go on right now and subscribe or try things out. You just have to, I think we have like a minimum of like 10 pounds or something that we got shipped, because shipping frozen things.
Yeah.
It's like the more you have, the more likely it is it's all going to be like solid, you know? I don't want you to get like a single thought out steak. So it's a lot of people are like, 10 pounds, that's a lot of meat. And I'm like, yeah, but it never goes bad. You just throw it in your freezer. Yeah.
Super easy.
And it's so much easier just to have like a stock of meat at your house.
Absolutely.
Because you're not constantly having to go to the store over and over. Like, I love having just a freezer full of meat.
Yeah, I grew up that way.
Something.
Again, sort of going back to the hunters in my family, I grew up, we always had meat. But I think as a mom, it's so helpful that I'm like, oh crap, what am I doing for dinner? And that morning I'll just go in the freezer, literally grab something, put it on the counter to thaw, and then you know, come in from working out here and make them dinner. So
and as a mom that's like really like a hermit and doesn't like to go out to the world, right? If Trav's out of town, I'm like, I'm gonna go over to the garden, I'm gonna grab some broccoli, I'm gonna go in the freezer, I'm gonna grab some meat, and I didn't have to see anyone, you know. And plus it's like, if you have a kid and 3 kids like we got, having every trip to have to leave the house to go and get something, you know,
such a pain in the butt.
And so being able to have everything available is the best, especially like when the pandemic hit and we were like, oh my God, we have all of our meat and produce here. This is the absolute best.
You were good to go.
And we saved so much money in the long run, you know, like all of that shipping and that packaging and all of the different hands that has to go through. Like we raise our cows and our chickens from, you know, conception until harvest. And a lot of times they have a breeding operation where then the cows are then moved to another place, or they're sent out to pasture until they get to a certain way, and then they're sent to a feedlot, then they're sent from a feedlot to a processing facility, and they're sent somewhere else to get packaged, and then they're sent to a grocery store. And these cows have like traveled thousands of miles by the time they've gotten onto your plate. And then it's also like adding all this more expense and your gas mileage to go there and back, or to whatever the delivery cost is for having it delivered to you. And so like just having a stock, like people get intimidated of like, oh my God, like this is a lot of meat, this is costing a lot. But I'm like, it's like going to Costco.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's
exactly.
Like, but it's like higher quality stuff.
Yeah, and I think of, I was in Austin for 5 years. We just moved back this last summer, and we had 2 ice storms there that knocked out. I couldn't drive anywhere with the kids. I was terrified. Like it was bad. And having the stock in my house, without losing power, which can be an issue too, but having all of that in the freezer, having stuff ready to go meant that whereas a lot of other people were in trouble because they didn't have anything to go to, I was like, well, I guess we're having, because I can use a grill and I can do these things, and I had that stuff available. Right.
And like when everybody else needs something, like, you know, like
I got you.
We became like the neighborhood freezer of like, what do you need? What do you need? We
bet.
got you. And it's funny. My family always jokes about the apocalypse are coming over to your house. I was like, bring skills. Don't bring anything but skills. We got
skills and weapons. We will need them both.
We got weapons.
This has been incredible. We've talked for an hour and a half, and I want to be mindful of your next thing. But before we wrap up, you got to tell people about the new book, where to get it, all the juicy, you've shared so many great stories today that like we all want to dig in.
Our Fight, this is the sequel to My Fight, Your Fight. And so it's my second memoir that I wrote with my sister, Maria. And it's basically detailing everything. I went kind of like radio silent on media at a certain point, and this is everything that I wished I could have put into words at that time that I finally have been able to. And it's basically everything that we were talking about today, of like my journey to stop living to impress other people, and instead, like, you know, finding happiness in things that are validating in themselves.
Yeah, thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for telling us stories and inspiring Jack and I to buy our future ranches earlier than we were anticipating.
BrowseAcres.com. Get your Wagyu and your poultry. I got it.